Hey fellas, before we get in the video, I just want to quickly say that I'm not advocating for or encouraging the doxing, targeting, harassment, or bullying of any individuals that may mention or feature in this video, or this is an opinion piece of my particular commentary on the subject matter, however controversial as it may be. So, without I quickly say it, let's go ahead and start the show. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Did you panic back and act top about CL type of something else? Yet again, it's more furry drama. Except this time there's a little bit of a twist because we're actually returning to a previous guest topic that I haven't talked about on the channel for a long damn time now. If you're curious as to what I'm referring to, this is really a throwback to that transitionary phase where I was gearing myself to be a full-time commentary channel. Obviously, back in the day, really depends on how long you've been with me for, because if you've been with me for several years now, you might remember the days where I was playing Amorous and various other furry-related games. Games in quotes, because sometimes they really pass the bare minimum of requirements like necessary to be considered a game, but I figured it was time for a change, you know? I wanted to get out there, I wanted to sort of talk about things that I thought furries would be interested in hearing about or would find appeal in, and so that's how I sort of made the transition into being a full-time commentary channel. So where does that bring us to today? Well, I have you all to thank. You've been instrumental in growing the channel, and you stuck by me through thick and thin, so thank you very much for, taking the time out of your busy schedules to, watch the content that I put up on YouTube. But as far as today, I'm going to give you all a brief history lesson as to why all of that sort of pertains to what we're going to be talking about here today. You already saw the title, so there's not a whole lot I can do to sort of up the ante as far as the anticipation factor, but I can go ahead and tell you why this is somewhat significant for me. Years ago, there was a particular video that was making its rounds throughout all of YouTube, and this particular video was really just a recording of a public debate held at the lobby in the Westin at Anthrocon 2018. It was right in front of the restaurant, but slightly beyond that. So if you've been to Anthrocon for any number of years, you probably know exactly where I'm talking about, but this particular debate, alright, how it led up to that point. A prominent musician who had fame and popularity in the furry fandom had called out a porn animator, who was also fairly prominent, had a vast following throughout the furry fandom, and was well known. Also a bit infamous at the time, still is, but for different reasons, but he basically made a call out and was just inviting him out to have a public debate with him, and the porn animator decided to meet him, and the two came together in the lobby of the Westin at Anthrocon and decided to talk it out. And the reason the musician felt compelled to call this guy out was because he was just espousing problematic opinions. He was saying a lot of very raunchy things, at least by the musician's estimation, and just he felt like he needed to challenge him. He needed to step up to plate and put him in his place, and all power to him, more power to him. The fact that he would feel compelled enough to bear the burden of what everybody was thinking at the time, because the porn animator did not exactly give himself any favors. He didn't exactly do himself any favors when he was saying things on social media. So a lot of people found him the least bit controversial, and the musician just figured this was high time to actually, put his own ideology and beliefs to the test and actually meet this guy for a mano-a-mano conversation. A heart-to-heart. And I really feel like more people should be talking, but these should be good faith talks, right? For instance, if one of you actually had a legitimate problem with anything that I was saying or espousing, then we would have an actual honest-to-God conversation about it, right? You wouldn't try to make a public spectacle out of it and, try to humiliate me or make me look stupid just for the sake of boosting your own ego, right? I would hope not. But that's basically how I found, the musicians, because this was, the first time I had ever seen this musician interact with somebody in a public space, alright? I had no expectations at that point. I was aware of his mere existence. I was aware that he had gotten up on stage and would perform at various furry conventions out there. But this was the actual first time that I'd ever seen him in action. His mode of character, his personality, the way that he conveys himself to others. This was the first time. And you know that old saying, first impressions are everything? This was a hell of a first impression because the guy came off as rude, offensive, brash, crass, boorish, crude, and the least bit... Okay, so I'm just gonna throw all that terminology and verbology out the window and say, the guy came off as a fucking prick, okay? I'm not gonna sugarcoat it for you. The guy came off as a fucking asshole, alright? And Assholes these days are a dime a dozen, but in his particular case, the fact that he would blend sort of his political beliefs in the way that he would articulate himself and get into arguments and like various Twitter slap fights with people was the least bit problematic for me. So, I watched this video. It had been uploaded several times. The cameraman, wasted no time in actually recording all of this. And the duration of the debate was only about 20 minutes. Maybe a little bit more. I'm not entirely sure where it was cut off, but it gave you a good idea about the conversation that the two had. And it was really from there that you got a sense of, the core issues. So, who are these two individuals, first of all, before we continue any further? I would like to introduce you all to PepperCoyote. PepperCoyote is the lead musician and singer and guitarist for the band Look Left. And, they're fairly prominent. They're a nice fixture here in the furry fandom. They released an album called Blast Radius. That's how I remember them off the top of my head because I really like their album cover. It was Fallout themed. You got to see a dragon covering his ears because there's a mushroom cloud explosion in the background. He's wearing a vault suit, so it was elements of Fallout blended into this album cover. And as far as the music, PepperCoyote's one claim to fame is his horsecock song. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, it's horsecock, put your ass in aftershock, which is a hell of a fucking thing to lay claim to fame. A lot of furries, even now, that's the one thing that they remember him most as. The guy that got up on stage to sing about horsecock. And if you're not a furry, no, it's not a reference to zoophilia, although the argument can be made. It's just a dumb furry joke, okay? If you look at the pornography and various other things that have cropped up over the years, it's kind of turned into something of a meme, but at the same time, that's what PepperCoyote was known for, and that's what a lot of people still remember him as. As far as the porn animator, take a wild fucking guess as to who I was referring to. That's right, it's your boy, Jasonafex. Partly why my channel grew in the early years, because I spent nothing but hours upon hours of my time playing Amorous. So Jasonafex, he's not an artist, alright? I just like to make that clarification real quick, but he does take imagery and he can manipulate it to animate it, to make it move, and he was considered fairly good at the time, although his critics would argue that he's not actually good, that he's just doing these jiggle bone, physics sort of things to make it look alright, but, as far as quality goes, there's a lot to be left desired, but Jasonafex and his girlfriend, or I should say wife, Kabir, I'm not entirely sure if they're actually married yet, but basically they were a tag team partnership, Kabir was the artist and Jasonafex was sort of the marketing guy. He animated things, he basically spearheaded a lot of projects like Amorous, Bareback Streets. Bareback Streets went through 2 iterations. The first one fell apart because I guess their team fell apart, but it got revived, so it's coming back. And various other things have kind of cropped up. So, in spite of the fact that Jasonafex is guilty, at least in the eyes of the general public, for, espousing some very raunchy opinions and hot takes on Twitter and other forms of social media, he still has a large following that's willing to sort of just overlook a lot of the indiscretions that he's engaged in, to look at his content. And I already posed the argument before. It's do you separate the art from the artist? Do you favor the art over the artist? How much do you value the artist versus the art? Because the artist is the one that's actually creating it in, independent of what their actual core beliefs are from the art. So some people can separate the artist from the art and appreciate the art for what it is versus the artist that may be somewhat lacking in so far as being likable or, charismatic, but that's not really a debate that I'm going to be having here today, because obviously my focus is on PepperCoyote. So that video, I actually made a commentary video about that. You're not going to be able to find it today, unless you go to my BitChute, which is kind of dead, because for whatever reason, the link between my YouTube and BitChute got, disconnected somehow. I'm going to have to revive that somehow, but I uploaded it there. It was originally on YouTube, but something happened. So let me go again and get into the details of the debate. And it has significance only to me, because in the grand scheme of things, was this really that significant? Probably not. But it's important to bear in mind, because this definitely shows PepperCoyote's mode of character. at least to me. And I'm just going to go ahead and show you all like little tidbits of this debate, and proof that it actually happened, because the cameraman, apparently it's an individual by the name of Renard Thatch. They have a fairly small YouTube channel, and they like to record various things that are furry related. I'm not really knocking him, but I will say he's a massive butt, because he's one of the people that came over to me and basically made a veiled threat that he was going to copyright strike the channel if I didn't take down my video.
Yes. Sitting in the lounge right in the lobby, green shirt, short hair, Jasonafex badge. I'll be here until, wait, lounge right in the lobby.
Let's go check the other area because he's...
I think a lot of the things that you say on the internet, you don't say because you believe them, you say it because you want the attention, and you think of the thing that's the craziest thing you could possibly say, and then you say it, so people go, what a jerk, because it's not really the things you're saying that you believe, it's the attention that you want. So you say purposefully really mean things to people for no reason.
And as you know, as like the DMs, that's my opinion. You already know what it is.
Yeah, but I think if you're in a fandom made of almost entirely marginalized people, and you continue to just spew anger at marginalized people, you can't be surprised when you run into pushback.
I'm not.
If you get beat up as a kid, it's your fault, and it was good for you.
Are we having a talk, or are we having like a thing?
I'm sorry, I'm better at talking than you talk.
If you actually read my Twitter, it's not that sensible.
Is it that funny though? And is it helping that many people?
It's not everyone's sensible.
Think that you didn't think of
If you use that as a reason for why you should say whatever you want, and
I'm not. It's like literally the point of the
then you have to back it up with some
like
walking
No! I'm gonna say whatever the fuck I want when I want.
And I honestly should have fought it, and I should have just let it fly, because I didn't break any rules. Like, it was fair use. But for whatever reason, Renard Thatch did not want this video to be public. Initially, it was supposed to be public because Jasonafex, if you actually watch the video and you remember it from, like, years ago, Jasonafex, even initially, he was kind of like expressing concern that he was being recorded, because he had no idea, like no knowledge that he was being recorded that entire time that the two were debating.
I don't care.
It's not an excuse. Turn to the camera.
Let's do it. Hi. Hang on.
Oh, I thought you were going to throw the N-word out.
By the way, recording people without consent is illegal.
No, we told you. Not in America. I told you in the thing we were going to record.
I also kind of like.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't block you though.
Bruh.
Because it was like PepperCoyote had called him out, and they were having a mano-a-mano like conversation. And as far as like the core substance behind the conversations that they were having, they were all over the place. But some notable things that I remember is that PepperCoyote was trying to make the argument that given the fact that Jasonafex has such a vast following, that he should take care to moderate and hesitate, really think and consider everything that he's going to say publicly, because PepperCoyote couldn't help but feel that Jasonafex was influencing some of the younger members of our community on a dark path that they shouldn't step upon, like basically trying to emulate their mentor, which in this case would be Jasonafex. And Jasonafex basically said, people can take the art, like they don't have to listen to my opinions, they don't have to take everything that I say to heart, they can just appreciate the artwork, because regardless, I'm going to say what I'm going to say, these are my beliefs. And, like, the other sticking point was that PepperCoyote couldn't help but feel that Jasonafex was the least bit insensitive, that some members of the community were basically saying, they were describing incidents that they felt were abusive, as in a parent or guardian had been abusive to them. And Jasonafex's take on that was that they were being disciplined, which there's a very fine line, like, between being abused and being disciplined. Some people out there are old-fashioned, so they're going to, like, fucking rip off their belt and beat you, like, over the ass if you happen to, like, step out of line. But if they're just doing that without basis or anything like that, or they're being excessive about it, that's where you go over the line into abusive territory, all right? A lot of people have tried to get away from physical disciplining of, like, a child, as far as, like, the ways that parents sort of, like, raise their kids, because it has been shown to have mixed I would say, like, mixed effects on the child as they grow up. For some children, it's a good thing. For other children, it's a bad thing. Jasonafex's argument across the board as to why it was a good thing is that it was strengthening the child to be able to face the challenges that they would face in the, like, world, like, as they grew to adulthood, which is debatable because the world today, I don't feel like a lot of these kids are equipped to face all of this, and that's independent of whether they were physically disciplined or anything like that. PepperCoyote took issue with that, so they had another, like, conversation about it, and just throughout the whole conversation, PepperCoyote would just get right up close, like, Jasonafex's face. He was loud, crude, offensive, and was just openly rude to Jasonafex. So this wasn't really an intellectually honest debate. This is more like two people having kind of like a conversation, and PepperCoyote trying to take any opportunity he possibly could to take the moral high ground, which is why I called him kind of like an asshole, okay? I'm just going to call it like it is. Like, even during the debate, like, PepperCoyote gets a call, and he just answers it, like, mid-conversation, and I don't know, like, this was definitely not an intellectually honest debate. And PepperCoyote claims that he didn't invite, like, the people that came with him. He had, like, 10 or so people with him, including the cameraman and his girlfriend. And supposedly, by PepperCoyote's claim, these people just came of their own volition. They found out about this. They saw this as a public spectacle. They wanted to take audience, break out the popcorn, and watch everything unfold. And the one thing that I remember the most is that there was this red-shirted guy who would take every possible opportunity to get into camera shot, get in between them. Like, he pretended to be interested in some, like, paraphernalia on, like, the little coffee table between the two. And I don't know, like, the dude just wanted to be on camera for some reason. Like, it was like 6 times he was just coming in and out of shot. But, like, even, like, PepperCoyote's girlfriend, or lady friend, I don't know if they're actually dating, but she came out, like, and, like, got mouthy with Jasonafex. Jasonafex, he came alone. Like, he didn't need his girlfriend. He didn't need, like, a crowd of supporters with him. He was just there to have an honest-to-God conversation. And so, yeah, I took issue, and obviously I took Jasonafex's side. Not defending or endorsing any of his problematic actions or opinions up to this point, but in the moment, he was calm, collected, and respectful of PepperCoyote, which PepperCoyote did not show. And, you know, I looked on, like, social media. I was just curious, like, what were the other impressions that people throughout the general public had of PepperCoyote? Because PepperCoyote, he didn't get to just, like, do or say things carte blanche. He acted like he did, but there were plenty of people that would step forward and say, like, Pepper, you can't just paint everybody with a broad brush and, like, you know, unilaterally try to demonize them because they disagree with you on one or two little things. And PepperCoyote, it's like a zero-sum game for him. So I guess, like, the key takeaway here is that his online behavior and, like, the way he, like, his demeanor, the way he carries himself in public, doesn't really differ too much from how he carries himself online, on social media. Although he seems to have moderated that just a little bit more recently in light of everything that's happened. But, so here's what happened. Last week, this was kind of surprising because this hit my Twitter feed, and I just kind of raised an eyebrow because as soon as I saw the name PepperCoyote, I was just like, really? Well, I haven't heard shit about that dude for years. I've been sort of loosely aware of, like, the things that he would say online, you know, the hilarious slap fights he would get into people, like, you know, the various hot takes that would get retweeted and things like that, but I had no idea that, like, this would happen, because out of nowhere, he was canceled unilaterally, and it was, like, a series of tweets where somebody would come out and say, "Hey everybody, it is with deep regret that I would just like to inform the general masses that PepperCoyote and I are no longer friends." All right, and I dug into why that was. PepperCoyote apparently became a member of CPI, and if you don't know what CPI is, it's the Center for Political Innovation. And the Center for Political Innovation, it's defined as an American socialist group, all right? They claim to be all for socialism. You might remember the Chicago Communist Conference that happened, like, last week, and how people came out, they were wearing, like, red berets, almost like they were inspired by Che Guevara, and they were bearing, like, the communistic emblems of the hammer and sickle on red banners. And in spite of all the pomp and circumstances, like, various people had researched what their actual core beliefs are, and they're not good, all right? Apparently they take a lot of inspiration from a individual by the name of Alexander Dugin. And Alexander Dugin is considered to be one of the people that Vladimir Putin, you know, head of Russia, president of Russia, took a lot of inspiration from as far as political strategy and, like, you know, ideology. Because if you're curious, Alexander Dugin himself, he's a political commentator, and he's also a political strategist. It doesn't really help that his daughter was killed in a car bomb, like, fairly recently. And now, before you break out, like, you know, the handkerchief and start wiping your, like, you know, I'd, like, shed a tear for the tragic death of his daughter, she was saying some fucking raunchy-ass shit as, like, absolute core beliefs that she was expressing, okay? That she felt that Ukraine as a country had no right to exist, that the Ukrainians that stood up against the Russian Red Army deserved to die, and that, like, Ukraine, as far as she was concerned, should already be part of Russia. Imagine, like, somebody coming to your country and saying that you don't have a right to, like, you have no right to a country, that you have no right to be what you are, that you need to be part of us. And that's part of the problem, because the Center for Political Innovation, they were completely supportive of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. They were also encouraging and hoping for the Chinese takeover of Taiwan, which has been a long time concern. Obviously, there is that whole concern that the United States has regarding, like, China and Taiwan, like, as far as, you know, foreign relations goes. Like, is it a two-China policy, or is it a one-China policy? That Taiwan is technically part of China, but we're going to, like, consider them both, like, or is it the two-China policy, where Taiwan is separate from China? Because if you know your history, Taiwan historically is where Chiang Kai-shek, you know, one of the generals that cropped up in the early 20th century, when they were having a civil war in China, he ran over, and, like, him and his supporters ran to Taiwan. And for whatever reason, Mao Zedong could never really stage a invasion of, like, you know, Taiwan, because I guess he just didn't have the resources. They didn't have the manpower. They didn't have, like, a good standing navy. Any number of reasons, but that formed the basis for years later that Taiwan would exert itself as being the true legitimate ruler of China. And obviously the Chinese, like, Communist Party would have, you know, a little bit more than just some strong words, like, in reference to Taiwan, but you're not here to listen to me talk about that. Regardless, Taiwan doesn't really seem to have much of a chance to resist, you know, a Chinese invasion, being such a tiny, like, country in relation to China. And, like, what's crazy is that Alexander Dugin, and, like, CPI for that matter, a lot of people, the adherents of the Center for Political Innovation, they consider that any resistance to America is a net benefit. So that's why they're willing to encourage fairly radical ideas about what should take place, as far as their twisted and distorted worldview. And wheeling it back to PepperCoyote, he was a open member of this organization. He actually defended his membership. He had attended the conference by his own words, and that he was saying that Caleb Maupin, the head of CPI, seemed like a good person and like a nice guy. It's just like, yeah, he seems like a pretty nice guy, you know what I'm saying? And nothing fascistic was expressed throughout the duration of this entire conference, in spite of the fact that something very funny would happen. So, how did the furry fandom react? Initially, it was nothing but hatred and vitriol, as it so often is the place, right? Like, that's more often than not what actually takes place whenever something like this happens, right? I guess it's breaking the expectations that people had of PepperCoyote of being, like, one of them. And people for a long damn time, like, they already knew that, like, PepperCoyote was, like, an ardent, like, socialist, communist. He was leftist, left-leaning. He hates capitalism, though the impression that a lot of people get is that he blames capitalism for just about anything that happens, good or bad. And, like, his whole rationale is that he holds contempt for the United States and how it, like, operates right now, and that being willing to support any other, like, ideology is a net benefit to what he actually believes in, And he would remind people, hey, I'm still communistic, okay? He bears the hammer and sickle in his, Twitter profile as a symbol. Although, more recently, if you look at it, and this has been the case for a long damn time now, not a long damn time now, but, like, a while, all right? Let's just say a while. He's got a stupid-ass fucking PFP, like, avatar picture. Honestly, my imagination, like, looking at that for the first time, I couldn't help but imagine that that was probably the face he was making when he was being actively canceled. And this is not going to be the first time that he's ever been canceled. I mean, if you remember back in 2020 when the COVID-19 vaccine was being doled out for the very first time, there wasn't a whole lot of the vaccinations to go around. You had, like, 3 main suppliers. You had Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Moderna, and you didn't have a whole lot of options. And PepperCoyote had actually, by the perception of the furry fandom at large, had jumped in line and sort of lied and cheated his way until getting, like, the front of the line to get a dosage of vaccine in him. And PepperCoyote's only defense was, I work with kids every day, goddammit! I can, like, infect them or they can infect me. I need this in my body. Okay, that's a gross exaggeration of how he reacted, but that was his rationale. I forgot to mention before, PepperCoyote is a school teacher, alright? That's the one thing I can tip my hat off and applaud him on, is that we definitely need more educators in this country, although I can't really attest to the efficacy or effectiveness of his particular curriculum, let alone what he teaches, but good for PepperCoyote, Like, I'm actually fully in support of that, although I really hope that he's not teaching those kids, like, terrible things, but I can say, like, I would imagine that he would sort of put on the kid gloves in teaching school children, okay? And I'm not trying to, like, take the piss when I say this. I'm not trying to, like, throw dirt in his place. That's the one thing that I can actually legitimately clap my hands up for, is that in spite of the fact that online and in real life he's a little bit of a dick, hey, at least he's looking out for the kids, right? But lying, like, he was sort of loosely encouraging others to lie to, like, get a dosage of vaccine for themselves, which at the time, given the fact that the dosages of vaccinations were fairly limited, they should have been reserved for people that had either immunocompromised immune systems, or maybe they were going to be, like, in, like, conditions at work that would put them at risk for contracting COVID-19. But no, like, he just threw all caution to the wind, just, like, was encouraging others to do whatever they could to get vaccinated as soon as possible. It was sort of like playing into that whole cult mentality where if you're not vaccinated, then, you're, like, unclean. You're not, like, welcome in the, like, rest of the furry fandom. So by now, like, most people should be vaccinated, and if you are not vaccinated yet, I would highly encourage you, before you do anything, to talk to your doctor to see if there's any risk factors of you having an adverse reaction to having, like, been vaccinated or anything like that. I have heard stories, although generally speaking, the statistics seem to support that it's fairly rare. Like, it's very rare. You're probably not going to have adverse reactions. You might have side effects in the beginning, but over the extended period of time, you'll probably be okay. Probably. But again, I'm not a physician, I'm not a caregiver, I'm not a doctor, so you're going to have to talk to your physician or caregiver for what they say. Anyway, But yeah, like the more that PepperCoyote would say online, it was just looking worse and worse. Like, there were various tweets where he would openly express admiration for, like, China. And in spite of the fact that China and their history with human rights abuses is, like, a mile long, given all of that, he was saying that they did more to lift people out of poverty than the United States has done in years, which, okay, maybe that's sort of a telltale sign that China's economy has improved, given the fact that we don't produce anything in America anymore, that China has taken up the slack at the cost of, honestly, their environment. Have you seen, like, the level of pollution over there? They haven't really addressed that yet. Also, it's really funny that PepperCoyote would, like, express all this admiration and adoration for China when, China is actively invading various provinces that are considered part of China. Have you heard about the Uyghurs? The Uyghurs are an ethnic minority group in China, all right? They're basically Chinese Muslims, and I've been aware of them for a while, but China has actively sort of been pushing into their territory, and the Uyghurs haven't been happy about it. Now, obviously, the Uyghurs would respond adversely and start staging attacks on, like, police stations and, Chinese civilians, so that prompted the Chinese government to basically round up Uyghurs, regardless of their involvement of, religious extremism or attacks on the general populace, and put them into concentration camps. Or, if you'd prefer, re-education camps. And there have been disturbing stories about, like, what China's been doing, like, as far as their response to the Uyghurs. So it seems like PepperCoyote isn't fully aware of that, or maybe he thinks it's just a conspiracy theory. That's a very good, convenient tagline, Anything that sort of contradicts the narrative that I'm trying to espouse, it's a conspiracy theory. It doesn't exist. The fact that China has endorsed and implemented a social credit score system to moderate its civilians, it doesn't exist. And if they're being moderated, it's probably for damn good reason. Anything to fulfill the end goal of all, total communism seems more like authoritarianism to me, but granted, that's why I'm sort of expressing doubts that PepperCoyote is socialist. I think he's, authoritarian communist. So he'd be something called, a tanky, and tanky's, slang for those that are either socialist or communist that sort of look to people like Mao Zedong or Joseph Stalin as role models for their aspired political beliefs. And it's something that sort of, happened with CPI. Because, the Center for Political Innovation, right, they have openly stated some, very problematic things. And the leader, Caleb Maupin, he's actually a correspondent for Russia Today. He's sort of the American correspondent for various things happening over here domestically. And Russia doesn't exactly have a good track record right now, especially under decades under Vladimir Putin, who he himself... are you aware how homosexuals and any member of the LGBTQ community are treated over in Russia? Not good, okay? You get arrested just for being gay, so it's probably something that you best leave a secret. I'm actually curious how so many furries are able to operate over there, though they are few and far between, so maybe that's just one of those things, because in Chechnya, they even have, gay concentration camps. As in camps where you're sent because you're, caught being a homosexual. So, yeah, in spite of all of that, let's just sort of wheel it back to right here, right now. Various people have come forward to try to inform to PepperCoyote, hey, listen, we couldn't help but notice that you're, a part of CPI, and we're trying to give you an informed explanation as to why we're concerned. Now, PepperCoyote would respond to all of this in a variety of different ways, but it really comes down to the fact that PepperCoyote seems to be he doesn't want to be proven wrong, so he's willing to ignore certain things or block people if he deems the conversation too far gone. Which, I don't know if it's sort of a symptom of his popularity going to his head, but there's been a clear progression of this throughout the entire time that he's been on Twitter, okay? And my first introduction to all of that was that debate that he had with Jasonafex years ago. I honestly think it's just progressed from there. I don't think that PepperCoyote is necessarily a terrible person, but he's definitely the least bit arrogant, and it makes him come off as a prick, okay? And, like, I got no personal beef with him. I've never had a personal conversation with him. I've never had a chance to, like, actually talk to him and get a sense of where his true opinions lie. But, like, in response to all the controversies and everything that sort of unfolded after it was revealed that he was a member of, like, the Center for Political Correctness, or the Center for Political Innovation, pardon me. He would just basically, like, deny certain things or advocate for the organization. And the best part about all this, the absolute best part about it is, are you with me, folks? Like, I'm on the edge of my seat, man. Like, do you see my face right now? Do you see this stoic smile that I have pasted all over my doughy face? The best part is that in spite of PepperCoyote being publicly lashed over Twitter and social media and just universally condemned by the rest of the furry fandom, CPI as an organization ceased to exist in just a couple of days after the conference had ended. And I would just like to take a moment of silence to share with you all the song that I believe everybody was listening to when that happened. All right.
Now comes the part where we throw our heads back and laugh. Ready?
Ready!
Pretty accurate to the situation, don't you think? So, PepperCoyote was outed as being a member of the Center for Political Innovation, and in spite of his reputation taking a nosedive, him being canceled, like all that trial and tribulation and frustration and aggravation, and the organization that he's proudly a member of just folds, like, days later. And it's like, even after the fact, like in the days after it was announced that the organization was going to fold, in the days after, Caleb Maupin was actually outed as being sort of like engaging in sexual misconduct, as in he sexually coerced various people, primarily women, that like were under the membership of the Center for Political Innovation. They came out and basically made wide sweeping allegations against him that they had been sexually coerced into encounters with them. So the perception that a lot of the furry fandom had in response to all of this is that not only was PepperCoyote part of a Nazi cult, he was part of a Nazi sex cult. And yes, the outward appearance is that it's an American socialist group. They have all the symbology and regalia of like communism and socialism, the whole nine yards. The problem is they don't seem to be actually communist in the conventional sense. They seem to be more like national socialists, like masquerading as communists and socialists. So where does that bring us to today? I'll just go ahead and say, it honestly reminds me, like all of this, everything that I described to you up to this point reminds me of a couple of things. Do you remember after World War I, Germany was basically forced to pay like massive reparations to all the Allied powers to compensate them for the cost of the war, World War I. And that's how you came about with the Weimar Republic. And the Weimar Republic, all of the returning veterans after World War I, they became members of the Freikorps. Not all of them, but like a sizable majority of them. And by that point, because Germany had signed the Treaty of Versailles, they weren't technically supposed to have a military. So the Freikorps was basically a paramilitary organization that was sanctioned by the Weimar Republic to be their like strong arm in putting down resistance groups. And these resistance groups, in light of like the terrible economy, everything, like you needed wheelbarrows and wheelbarrows of money just to buy loaves of bread. In light of everything that was going on, like for instance power outages and various other things that were causing disturbances throughout the local population, you had various socialist and communist groups spring up that were in active opposition of the government. And the Freikorps would come in and, in defending the government, they would just put down these violent uprisings and get into firefights with their own citizens. And it was in this maelstrom of decay that Hitler began his rise to power. And if you remember, he he basically made an organization called the Brown Shirts. They were National Socialists. Now here's the thing. In the face of Hitler's rise to power, he actually brought in a lot of various people that weren't necessarily sharing in the grand vision that he had of National Socialism. What happened was there were a good number of people that were sort of brought in that they only tolerated the idea of putting on the uniform and being a member of the Brown Shirts, but they weren't true National Socialists. And a lot of people that recognized that, they would refer to them as beefsteak Nazis. They weren't true fascists in the sense of fascism at large. They were at its core communists, brown on the outside, red on the inside. In PepperCoyote's case, I guess it's the other way around. It's red on the outside, brown on the inside. What's that describing? A ham bone? Ham beast? He is a ginger, so he's if you look into his eyes, I would say there's windows into his soul. And he has none, because he's a ginger. Alright, I'm just taking the piss, but it does beg the question, where his true beliefs lie. Was this really just a glorified sort of struggle between his ego and the concerns of his friends? Because a good many people came out, and they were Caleb Maupin has expressed veiled sort of transphobic comments. He is one of the people that said that transphobia is an ideology that should be respected, which that just seems like you're excusing hatred of other people on the basis of just what they are. People that have gender dysphoria and are trying to become the desired sex that they feel they are. I don't think that's really a basis to hate them, but okay. The hatred of these individuals needs to be respected, according to Caleb Maupin. So, you can see why a good many people kind of took issue with PepperCoyote's membership of CPI. Wasn't any of their business, Maybe they had built up expectations of PepperCoyote being a true blue friend, having him in their life, and they had developed sort of a internal image of him. And was outed that he was a member of CPI. It kind of broke the image, and they couldn't handle it. So that's why you saw so many tweets come out where they're just basically apologizing to the general community and saying, after a long extended conversation, or no conversation, if PepperCoyote blocked them, we are no longer friends anymore, and I'm sorry. Not to take too much more of your time, but I will say, remember that whole debate I was describing to you all before? I had the most surreal comparison to that. You remember when Donald Trump was running, pre-2016, he had to pick a running mate. So he picked Race Bannon. He picked Mike Pence, who basically looks like Race Bannon. And if, I would just say, Mike Pence, if you're watching this somehow, your political career ain't going nowhere. But I got an idea for you, man. Get into contact with Hanna-Barbera. Maybe we can do a live-action Johnny Quest movie. I think you would be a shoo-in for Race Bannon, all right? You got the voice, you got the looks, you got the hairstyle. You'd be a shoo-in for Race Bannon. Or maybe that guy from C-Lab 2077. Either way, Mike Pence was Donald Trump's running mate. Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, she picked Tim Kaine. And Tim Kaine, as far as I'm concerned, it really came out during the debate that they had. Mike Pence and Tim Kaine. Tim Kaine came off as kind of just weird and crazy. I could imagine that if he grew out his hair and grew a mustache and beard combo, he'd be a dead ringer for Dr. Wiley. So you got Race Bannon debating Dr. Wiley. And Mike Pence was actually calm, cool, collected throughout the duration of the debate. I will say, the comparison I'm making is that Jasonafex was basically Mike Pence, whereas PepperCoyote was basically Tim Kaine. And the comparison makes even more sense given the fact that PepperCoyote is on the left, whereas Jasonafex, by furry standards, has comparatively conservative views. All right, I don't think that's an unfair comparison to make, but I will say, Jasonafex was calm, collected, and respectful of PepperCoyote throughout the duration of the debate. He did have one outburst because PepperCoyote kept interrupting him and cutting him off and doing this, that, and the other. And he's just like, no, I'm going to say whatever the fuck I want to say in the moment. Which is fair. I mean, that's like, freedom of speech. Although a lot of people would be quick to remind Jasonafex and various other people out there that while each of us has the freedom of speech, we are not free from consequences, which is the extension of the judgment of the furries and our peers. All right, so I don't know. It's like a lot of memories kind of came back as like a sweet reverie, but it was also kind of contempt for Renard Thatch, who was apparently the cameraman that was recording the whole thing. And I have no idea if Renard Thatch is even friends with PepperCoyote, but both PepperCoyote and Jasonafex were okay with the video being like made public. Although I will say the video in its entirety kind of made PepperCoyote look bad even then. And I think Renard Thatch, he probably wanted nothing to do with the drama, so he went out of his way to try to pull damage control for PepperCoyote, which is, I think is kind of a dick move, Like, once you make something available publicly and then you suddenly take it away, like, it just seems like you're trying to cover up something that actually happened and pretend like it never happened. And those that want to know, they have a right to know, Once you make that public, like, they're not going to forget about that, and I certainly haven't. And do I hate Renard Thatch for that? No, but I think it was the least bit dishonest, like how he came up to me and acted like, yeah, I just want you to tear down the video. And you gotta understand from my point of view, I was just starting out in commentary at the time, so I didn't really want to get into it with anybody, and like go all full piss and vinegar. Nowadays, it's like, but then it was like, I was a bright-eyed, aspiring young YouTuber that had big dreams and aspirations for growing the channel. Years later, not much has changed. But I have you all here watching this video right now. So thank you. Thanks for sticking by me through thick and thin. I wanted to release this video a lot sooner than it actually came out, but you gotta understand, the last 2 weeks at work have been absolute hell on me, and these videos, I wanted to get my facts straight and actually release something worth a damn to you all, versus just throwing anything out there to the wind, you know what I mean? So I would say at least 85% accurate, and the remaining 15% would be conjecture. But yeah, that's really all I have to say about that. And if I remember anything else, I will be sure to share it with you all. Oh, and I didn't get into the rest of this. I just remembered. So what were the net consequences of PepperCoyote being canceled? Like, he was outed as being a member of CPI, or the Center for Political Innovation, and in spite of all the aggravation and, drama that happened after the fact, what happened? Denver, banned him outright. He wasn't allowed to perform on stage anymore, and he wasn't allowed to attend it as a attendee. Eurofurence, on the other hand, basically banned him from performing, but he's allowed to attend as a attendee. So PepperCoyote went to Eurofurence, which was this past weekend. So apart from that, I remember PepperCoyote basically expressing that things had been rough lately. And I can certainly sympathize with him because I've been there too. But at the same time, I really hope that that's sort of the basis where he can sort of do some self-reflection and decide that the way that he engaged with other people, was it in good faith, or was he caring more about his own ego and reputation than actually being honest and sincere and genuine with the people in his life? Because a lot of people, they openly said, we were close friends, I really liked PepperCoyote, but the fact that these are his true political beliefs, that's kind of a deal breaker. All right, I cannot in good faith advocate or associate with somebody that is a part of an organization that engages in hate. All right, that's basically what they would say. And it was a lot of tweets like that. So, I hope you had a good time at Eurofurence. A lot of people openly mocked PepperCoyote, basically acting like, ain't nobody gonna miss that horsecock song of yours. But hey, there's a good many people that still support PepperCoyote, so it's not like he's out of the game. It's just that this is one more notch on the belt, as it were, of another time they got canceled. So where are things going to go from here? Well, only time will tell, right? I will say that PepperCoyote has definitely aged since I last saw him in that video, but then again, it's been 4 years, so I've aged, you've aged, everybody else that gives a damn has aged. But he seems to have aged a little bit faster. I don't know. I'm not trying to like make anything of his appearance or anything like that, but it is something I noticed. Like his age is definitely starting to show. But actually, there is something that I forgot to mention, and while I have you all here, like right here, right now, I'd just like to go ahead and cover it, because I forgot to cover it throughout the entirety of the video, but it's something that sort of just came to mind. The whole reason that I titled the video as I did is because PepperCoyote, like in his rise to fame and popularity and being a minor celebrity here in the furry fandom, he has like gone out of his way to sort of put people on blast and engage in cancel culture, and if not with the implicit desire to do so, would indirectly facilitate the conditions by which people would get canceled, you know? All eyes on him, all eyes on the people that he's engaging with, kind of trying to raise awareness. And, like, he has obviously made the distinction that certain people do not belong here in the furry fandom. I kind of agree, but whether or not, like, you can really kick them out, it really comes down to the judgments of other people. You can't really rightly tell people who they can and cannot associate with. That's kind of a decision that they have to come to on their own. But, like, he would go out of his way to sort of, like, argue and engage with, like, various people in internet slap fights about political ideologies and his personal beliefs and opinions. And if the other person didn't really meet his expectations as far as his core beliefs and opinions, then they were like considered a Nazi or a racist or a transphobe or a homophobe or any number of whatever little label was happened to be like the word of the day. And it begs the question if he even did this for the benefit of the furry fandom at large. Because some people, like, they definitely cast doubt on that simple premise alone. Is, like, PepperCoyote really looking out for the common furry out there? Or is he just trying to pad his own ego? And with so many people having been blocked by PepperCoyote without so much as a conversation as to what PepperCoyote believed in, why they were having a, like, beef with the other person, he would just block them outright, and it put into question a lot of the associations that he had built over the span of time, who his real friends were, like, what he was all about, and was he willing to put his core beliefs above his friends. And obviously, you're going to have principles that you are going to be beholden to, but was this really because he absolutely believed in them, or was it because he didn't want to admit that he was wrong? Because, you know, when your ego gets so big, admitting that you're wrong is admitting to the fact that you're imperfect. And some people just cannot stomach that. They will come up with any lie, excuse, or any number of strategies to try to avoid admitting that they're wrong. You know, blaming the other person, or, like, you know, holding true to your beliefs, which, if they were actually legitimate and heartfelt, then PepperCoyote would have nothing to worry about, but they do not seem to actually be. Like, this is not the case of him, like, you know, being judged because of something that he absolutely believes in. I don't think he fully understood the ramifications of his membership being a part of what was equated to being a Nazi cult, alright? So, and then they came for PepperCoyote is basically, like, signifying that those that live by cancel culture are doomed to die by it. Or at least in PepperCoyote's case, his reputation was doomed to die by it. And I think it's well-deserved, honestly. I think this has been a long time coming. Like, you know, the sort of progression from the days of, like, that debate that he had with Jasonafex up till today, there's been a clear, like, progression, and various people have seen the cracks beginning to show. And they've noticed that PepperCoyote, he's not, like, the fun-loving guy that he seems to be up on stage, that he has some... he's basically a prick. Like, in not so many words, alright? That he's basically an asshole, alright? Is he a bad person? You can be, like, a not-so-bad person and still be an asshole. I don't think he's, like, a truly malicious or malevolent, like, force here in the furry fandom. But I do think he definitely overstepped some boundaries, and he kind of, like, was just willfully ignorant to the concerns that were expressed by people that had legitimate concerns to share with him. And his, like, brushing them aside by blocking them or avoiding the topic of interest, or just, like, you know, avoiding talking about it, having a clear, like, conversation with people that were looking out for his well-being and their own personal, like, you know, comfort. Yeah, it just kind of shows that he's willing to choose ego over accepting the idea that maybe he was wrong on this one. But, like, this just looked worse and worse from the get-go. Like, CPI folding days after, like, PepperCoyote's reputation took a nosedive. It was hilarious. Hilariously sad, but hilarious nonetheless. Anyway. You know, thinking about it, I guess PepperCoyote would be considered a Nazbol. At least that's the perception that a lot of furries out there have of him. And if you're wondering what a Nazbol is, it's referring to the National Bolshevism, or like National Bolshevism like party. It was a party from Russia where the ideology kind of originated, and historically it's had sort of like the unholy trinity between socialism, communism, and fascism. And in spite of the fact that they've denied that they have any links to fascism, their advocation for totalitarianism and like authoritarianism kind of dispels like kind of the illusion that they're all for like just being far left. But yeah, like as far as political ideologies go, Alexander Dugin, he's the guy that sort of like blended all of these ideologies together, and it's something that he advocates for in his work, you know, his political commentary. And I can't help but like feel that the attack on his daughter that resulted in her death in the car bomb explosion was probably aimed at him. So her, like, you know, the tragedy of her dying was actually because they were trying to get him, I would imagine. But tensions are running pretty high out there in like Eastern Europe right now, especially around the Ukrainian area and especially in Russia, because not everybody in Russia is advocating for this war in Ukraine. But I digress. That's pretty much everything I had to say. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Till next time, guys, take care and peace. I hope you all have a better one. Hey fellas, thanks for watching the video today. I really hope you all enjoyed it. Would you care to hit that like button, subscribe for more? You know I really appreciate that, right? And hey, if you're in the mood for gaming, why don't you check me out on Twitch sometime? Link in the description below. Anyway, till next time guys, take care and peace. I hope you all have a better one.